What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of On the Block. Joe Ferrari here with the Igor Henriquez. Igor, why don't you tell us what you got on today?
Well, you know what? I'm feeling good. It's been a few weeks, and I'm in the Halloween spirit. Figured, I'd show some love. I've been called a sheep, a witnesser, and now they gotta call me the 4-time champ. Feels good, I tell you. Feels good. I got my belt. I got my LeBron jersey on. It's feeling good. I'm enjoying my moment. Shout out to the special correspondent. This is especially for you.
Oh my God.
Feeling great, and enjoying the Halloween spirit.
Okay, so we had talked about when we did the show, especially when I was out, we talked about how the Clippers and the Lakers were the two teams that we thought had the best chance to win. Obviously, Milwaukee and Toronto. Breathe in that.
Feeling good.
But you didn't have, the most faith in the Lakers. You wanted them to win, but you thought the Clippers were going to do it.
Yes.
And some report, actually, take it. I want to hear what you got to say. So you didn't have faith in the Lakers, but they were.
Here's the thing. I always had faith in LeBron James, but I'm also trying to be as unbiased an analyst in terms of the NBA as I can possibly be. And simply, I'll be the first to admit that I thought that the Clippers had the better team. If you look at it on paper, the better team were the Clippers. Now, but here's the thing. The best team on paper doesn't always win. And then that's just realistically, and that's what sport is all about. You got the COVID situation, you have the bubble, the 5-month layoff. And then you got to have the situation where you're like, how's the team gelling and so forth. So, I'd be the first to tell you, I didn't think that up 3-1 on the Nuggets, that the Clippers would blow 3 games in a row. I don't think anybody really would have thought that. But team chemistry and, the determination and the mental fortitude is a thing. So obviously the Clippers were a little overestimated on how they would perform in the playoffs based off the fact that that we saw some signs of dissension and perhaps preferential treatment that Paul George or Kawhi Leonard were receiving. There were reports of that. Everyone thought come the playoffs the talent will come together, but it ended up being that heads would roll. Doc Rivers is out. There's reports that Paul George might be traded in the offseason, and that they may just do it all over again with a different situation. Now, the problem that they have is, they traded away all that draft capital to acquire Paul George. George is obviously on a hefty contract. He's obviously gotten his reputation, especially that last game where he was shooting threes that hit the side of the backboard. And his reputation and his trade value is probably at his all-time lowest, and that's just the honesty.
It's still an all-star.
It's still an all-star. But again, are you going to do the Clippers any favors by taking that contract and giving him back valuable assets?
No. There's also an opt-out after next season, right?
That's exactly it.
There's 1 year left for both these guys.
Paul George is one of those things that I can see him possibly opting out. I think Kawhi's put too much into the marketing and wanting to stay at home that he'd likely play it out. But again, we see these things where sometimes these teams that come together in the first year, they always end up struggling and then they end up recovering. Now, they might lose Harold, they might and so forth.
They will. Yeah.
So, it depends how they run it back. There's reports that they want to bring in Rondo because they're missing a true point guard out there. Patrick Beverley, though he talks a lot, I think he averaged 2 assists a game in the playoffs, that wasn't going to cut it. So, they might retool now. Like I said, I always had faith in LeBron. But again, all in all, I thought that their biggest problem would be the Clippers. And then when they didn't have the Clippers, I think I was the first one. As soon as that game was over, I was sending that face because I knew it was over. Because that was the one team that I figured, could beat them. I did think the Bucks would have an opportunity, but then they fell apart. Everything did go the Lakers' way, and that's just the honesty of it. So all in all, it was a great fourth championship. Who knows what'll happen next year when it starts, and then they're talking about January and so forth. But gotta enjoy it. Live in the Basque, and no one's gonna be coming for me for Christmas or anything. So that's another W in the win column. So. It is what it is. You got to enjoy.
We talked about that, both of us, the only team that the Lakers really had, maybe an issue against with matchups was the Clippers. And like you said, once that was done, there wasn't really much in their way. Like, we saw Miami, and we had chatted back and forth with Lamar and with the guys in the group. After game 1, we said this might be done quick, especially after those injuries to Bam and Goran. But they won a few games. Jimmy Butler obviously deserves a lot of props because we talked about on the show, and everybody did, between Jimmy Butler and Paul George forever. And Paul George always had the upper hand. And now I think what Jimmy Butler has shown that Paul George hasn't really shown is like superstardom in the playoffs?
Sure, I think that I think mental fortitude is an underrated ability that a lot of these guys. Again, Jimmy, I think by the last game, because the last game was pretty much over at halftime. Jimmy was just worn out. Like he just couldn't do that at a sustained level because he was playing 40, 46, 47 minutes. He was basically carrying them a load of the offense. You had some night with a game 5, you had Duncan Robinson that went off, but those sustained efforts weren't really there. And yeah, I mean everything went the Lakers' way for game 6, where at halftime people. I don't think I remember can't remember the last time that someone declared I think the analysts at halftime were declaring the game over at halftime, declaring the Lakers the champion. Very rarely do you ever see that in an NBA situation.
Well, the score was insane.
It was like they were up like
30?
30, 35, yeah. 30, 35 points. And truthfully, they weren't even shooting the ball that well from distance. They were just inside, just hammering in there. And, you could tell that they were, they heard a lot of the critics, especially off of that Danny Green miss, and then they didn't want to keep that one close. But overall, it was a weird season, right? Like some people say that, it's an asterisk behind the championship. I personally don't believe that, and the fact that sure you had 5 months off, but that bubble situation where you can't really leave and you can't really go anywhere for 3 months, it's a tough situation. I think that's actually harder than having the home court and traveling and so forth, because of the fact that you can't do anything else but to distract you. If you don't have like a good set of teammates that you can distract yourself with, or a good like mental capabilities, you're in trouble. And I think that's what we saw with the Clippers. That a lot of them didn't want to be there.
That's what I was looking into.
That's the situation.
The reports came out that the Clippers didn't want to be there, and I think that for whatever it's worth, if this were a non-COVID situation, I don't think that the Clippers would have lost to Denver, especially blowing a 3-1 lead, given the travel and all that stuff. But whatever happened. I guess we're pretty much done with the finals.
Well, I mean,
do you think Miami comes back strong next year? How good do you think that they bounce back?
You know what? It'll be interesting because we're seeing a lot of moves, and I think when the offseason really hits in terms of free agency, there isn't like a high caliber of free agent, but I do see that there'll be there seems to be a lot of movement in Philly, a lot of movement in Brooklyn in terms of coaching. I think the Daryl Morey hiring for Philly will be interesting if he keeps Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid. I think that team still has a lot of capabilities, but they're a little handcuffed with some of those contracts. So I think it's a little early to say that Miami has a realistic chance of getting back, because again, it's one of those situations that I personally believe that had Toronto ended up beating Boston in that game 7, that they probably could have had a decent opportunity to beat Miami in that series. So I think it'll be different depending on the landscape. What happens with the Raptors and then a couple of the other teams. Brooklyn, obviously, how's Durant and Irving gonna coexist? What's like D'Antoni looks like he's gonna be joining that staff. How's that gonna work out? So there's a lot of questions. I think Brooklyn probably has the higher end offensive capabilities, but we all know how Kyrie Irving and Durant can end up destroying team chemistry. So that might be a problem. We'll see. We'll see how Durant comes back.
Also injuries, like you said,
Yeah.
like both those guys have had their share of injuries. Obviously, KD more recently with the Achilles, that was a bit of a freak thing, but Kyrie seems to be hurt almost every year, and that's another wild card too.
And his attitude.
You think that Philly? How do you think Philly comes back next?
Here's
It can't be worse
the
than
thing,
they were, right?
Here's the situation. They're coming to a crossroads where they can't. Like, what are they going to do? That Tobias Harris contract is definitely limiting what they can do because he just hasn't been a good fit there. Al Horford's long in the tooth, and he just isn't working in that system either. They might be able to ship that one off because it's a shorter term and less money, but they're really handcuffed on what they can do because, again, do you give up on Simmons? Do you give up on Embiid? Do you run it back again, knowing that you can't really do much with the team except throw in some role players? Like they're probably the most interesting case to follow because I think everybody else, besides maybe Boston losing Gordon Hayward, which again, see how that turns out, and maybe Indiana moves away from Oladipo. Besides that one, Fred obviously with the Raptors, but I think that's a little bit of a lower scale depending on how much money he gets. Mm-hmm. There's a lot going on, a lot of balls in the air, but like I said, it's going to be an interesting offseason. Like what happens with Golden State, the draft.
And the Lakers have a lot of free agents as well, right? I think that most of the team is free agents.
KCP and Rondo will probably need to get paid.
Dwight Howard, obviously.
Yeah, and I think the Lakers, Lakers have this, I think that they have LeBron, they have AD,
Los Angeles.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, if you want to be a winner, I think it's been proven fact that join them will do well. And I think KCP probably deserves, like Rondo, I think was on for like 2.5.
He got a minimum last year, right?
So he's probably deserved higher money. But again, it really depends on what the Lakers see in there. They're going to have the cap space because again, They got to pay AD, but they'll have enough cap space to bring some of those guys back. So I mean, personally, I don't know. Like, I mean, is Dwight replaceable? I think Dwight's replaceable. I think he
but
showed
if he's
that.
going to come back on a minimum, then why not bring him back?
Why not? And then I mean, KCP's up and down. I think Rondo is probably the one that they really do have to keep because I think his influence in the playoffs was pretty big considering he took the ball out of LeBron's hands.
Give him some rest.
Give him some rest, and it was just another ball handler
and a creator for the team.
He was hitting some threes. He played well. It looked like it was Rajon Rondo from like 5-6 years ago. So they'll probably could have been him going to the Clippers would be kind of weird, but you know.
If he's going to get the money and he wants to win another ring, why not? He owes them really nothing, right?
Yeah, I mean, it would be a little bit of a weird situation for sure, considering the fact, but who knows? I think that the Clippers are probably missing. That was probably maybe their one missing ingredient where
a pure point guard.
A pure point guard, which I guess
set the table.
I mean, Kawhi had that last year with Kyle and with Fred and so forth, and I think they are missing that because I think Patrick Beverley's a solid like bench player,
Yeah,
but he's not a starter. He's not a starting point guard. And again, and then Williams also isn't the guy that's going to create a lot of assists.
And sacrifice for
lemon pepper Lou, and we all know we all know where exactly his head was at when they got into the bubble. So
and that I think speaks for the Clippers team, really, right? And a lot of those guys, probably what we talked about, he didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
But I want Jimmy Butler and also LeBron. You talked about Rondo and giving a ball handler and giving you such a break. And I think that what the Lakers did as the finals went on is they really pressured Jimmy because once Dragic went on, he was their only creator and ball handler, right? And I think that's what wore him down. It wasn't even necessarily the 45 minutes because if you're only really playing on offense and picking your spots to guard LeBron, I don't think it's that big of a deal. When they picked him up like half court or full court some of the times, right?
Yeah.
And that's exhausting.
And I mean, to Jimmy's credit, at the end of the day,
hell of a performance.
Hell of a performance for sure. And again, the great Game 6 one was a little limited, but I mean, realistically, they started putting AD on him for a lot of the plays. And as good as Jimmy is, that's AD's got a huge height advantage. He's a great defensive player. You always knew that was going to be a big problem. You could tell even during the games when Jimmy saw that it was going to be AD guarding him, Jimmy would really uncomfortable, and he'd ask for someone to come in and do a little pick and roll situation because he knew that one on one he with the length and with the height it was going to be a problem for him. So I mean, I give him credit. Do I really think that a Jimmy Butler led team is ever going to win the finals based on him leading the team? I would probably, as the lead dog, probably not. It's just too much of a star-driven league. And though I think Jimmy's an all-star level player, I don't see, unless he's got a magnificently great supporting cast. I see him maybe as a 1B, but I don't know if I see him as the main guy to win the win.
Okay, so let me ask you this then: do you ever see Boston win a championship with their core?
You see, I think Boston has a different situation because I think Tatum can reach another level.
You think so?
Yeah, I think Tatum can be a guy that can reach another level where he's young and you can tell that he's developing. And I think we still see a higher level from Tatum where he can become a dominant player. So that's the one difference I see with the Celtics. Again, it really depends on what's going on with I think coaching wise they're pretty good and I think they need a little more depth, but it really does depend on where Tatum goes. It really depends on where you see where Tatum's peak is at. I think he's still got another level, maybe 2 to go. And he showed some glimpses. He was against the Raptors, he was magnificent.
Yeah, he didn't miss much. And when they went against Miami too, it was the same thing.
Yeah.
We had that question on the show: who would you rather have right now? Obviously Tatum's younger, but who would you have right now? I think that Jimmy was the answer that we gave both of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think right now I would say based off of what I saw, I would probably say that Jimmy is ahead, but because of the age gap, I think Tatum still has ways to go. And again, it'll be his team in Boston. And again, he could be he could be in one of those situations where guys like Don, let's call a spade. As much as everyone's on the Giannis train, he's been a pretty big failure in the playoffs. I mean, we got to call
his inability to shoot.
His inability to shoot when stuff gets tougher, when defenses take him make him an outside shooter, hasn't performed. So
we've seen AD do that too, and I don't want to stand up for Giannis because he won MVP and everything. That was another conversation. There was the Jimmy, Paul George, there's also the Giannis and Anthony Davis, and now we saw Giannis won Defensive Player of the Year. We know what he is, and Anthony Davis showed that he might win it next year.
Yeah, and I think the interesting factor is that and I think Giannis is gonna have to come to grips with this if he decides to stay in Milwaukee. Who's gonna be the 1B? That's his biggest, because as much as Chris Middleton's been a great story, I don't know. I don't think Chris Middleton's the type of guy that's going to be a co-star and able to lead you that much. Not just honestly.
No, and I don't disagree with that. So let's flip this. If LeBron James, instead of getting Anthony Davis, gets Giannis, and we flip this around, let's just say next year for whatever that happens, you're flipping AD and Giannis. Is that team better or worse? Do they win a championship next year? Very similar players, obviously.
I would say based on the fact that Giannis struggles because I mean AD is a very good shooter. Even I think that's a tough question because I think that's a tough one. I think it would be a worse team in a sense that I think AD and Giannis have similar defensive capabilities, but because AD is a much better shooter, I think with LeBron's style of game where he likes to break down, I think the Lakers would actually be worse with Giannis.
Could they still win a championship? Could
they still win a championship? I mean, when you got two Bulls like that, I mean, two MVP of course you can still win a championship, but their playing style would be different, and how teams play them. I think like when you got like LeBron and Giannis bullying your way to the.
Well, you just get a bunch of shooters there, right? Now you have an offseason to reconstruct your team, maybe, right?
But you have that, and you have to you hope that those guys. I mean, I don't think Danny Green had the best of playoffs.
That's almost 2 years in a row, though.
Yeah,
right?
in all honesty, and there's again you get shooters, but like they relied on guys that, and then especially. You know, I don't think anyone thought Caruso was going to do that.
Yeah.
And you know, Rondo's hitting threes. They didn't. I won't say they had the best. I think they were.
KCP hits.
They were like 20 in the low 20s in 3-point percentage. So the shooters on the team more. And you had Morris put. I said every time I saw Morris shooting them, half the time they would be air balls or wouldn't even be anywhere close. Yeah. So you need better shooters. I think with that current thing, I think AD was actually one of the other I don't you give Giannis that shot that game winner. I don't think Giannis hits that. And I think that's why people you had to come out on AD to protect that because AD can hit those shots. I think with Giannis, you give him those shots. So I think the defensive systems would be different. But it all depends on the capabilities of the other.
Secondary cast,
you need better shooters for sure, I think at least. But again, bullying your way to Giannis to LeBron to Giannis, I think that would be crazy. But it could be possibly be beaten depending on what you get in terms of the shooting if you just pack the post. And again, Giannis's free throw shooting isn't great. LeBron's free throw shooting isn't great.
Yeah.
So there's ways around it.
One last thing that I just thought of before we take a break. After the break, we'll come back and talk Raptors. Let's just say it, and that's crazy. Paul George gets traded for Giannis. So you got Kawhi and Giannis there going up against AD and LeBron.
That would definitely
and maybe somewhat realistic, right? If the Bucks know that Giannis is not re-signing, let's get some value for him, and you throw in some pieces that the Clippers obviously have, maybe Luke
and I would say that the Clippers have better shooters than the Lakers, Shaman and so forth. So that could possibly work. Now I don't know how Milwaukee would feel about that, and I personally think that Milwaukee's gonna play it out. I think they believe. I think they believe they'll resign him. They believe that Giannis is a loyal guy. I think it really depends on how they do next year. I don't.
We say this every year about Milwaukee, right? How are they going to do this year? Where the championship is going to go? And
and the problem with them is that they're as more as this goes, there's more problems coming in because you look at the league gets better, and you look at now everyone believes that this Brooklyn team's going to be solid, so that gives you another hurdle.
Obstacle.
A Boston team that's basically giving you again. They beat them last year pretty handily, but that's getting better.
A year better, yeah.
Yeah, and then you have the Miami, who's probably going to get better. Yeah. You have another year out of
76ers.
Tyler Hero's going to be better. Robinson, they're going to bring that core back. They're not going to be losing much. So here's the thing: Giannis did get injured, but the Heat were still dominating them throughout that series. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be problematic. The Bucks want to spend money, but they're also in situations where their contracts are.
Middleton got one of the richest deals in league history too, right?
No one's taking on that Bledsoe money. I don't know who you unless you didn't make it again the Lopez. I think Lopez has actually been a pretty good player for them, and they have these other guys, but I don't know how much better they're going to get in these offseason. I know they want to spend, but I don't know who they're going to. They're already.
We know they're going to win 60 games probably in the regular season.
Sure, but that doesn't. We all know that doesn't really matter, right?
Exactly.
Especially when and the bubble kind of shows you had Milwaukee had home court, they probably would have been more successful. Exactly. Without that home court, they weren't much of anything for the most part. They beat the first round. They beat a team they should have beaten pretty easy, and they lost the game. And then the second round, they were just disasters. So yeah, it was rough. It was a rough go, and then I think Coach Bud is on the hot seat. He's another guy.
Whenever you win the Coach of the Year, it seems like the except Nick Nurse, but it seems like all the guys that won, like there's nowhere to go but down from there. Because usually, right, you finish first or whatever it is, and you don't repeat. Where's there to go? And with Milwaukee, like we said, how do they improve? They're not going to get a top draft pick. Like they pretty much stuck.
I think their biggest problem, and I think we've discussed this before, is that they chose wrong in terms of who they kept in terms of Bledsoe and Malcolm Brogdon. I think they missed Brogdon quite a bit.
His defense.
And Bledsoe just hasn't been the same really in the last couple of years, and that money is going to be pretty huge. So
and we saw that even against the Raptors.
They might have to trade bad contract for bad contract and hope a change of scenery might do something. I don't know. It'll be an interesting situation. And again, it all depends on like even the Raptors. We don't know what's going to happen with the Raptors. Who's coming back? Who's not? Well, they're definitely, if they lose all those free agents, they're definitely going to be a worse team. That's just
we're gonna have right there. We're gonna take a quick break, come back, and talk about the Raptors going to look like next season with Fred looming into free agency. See you guys in a second. We're back on. Welcome back, guys. Second half of the On the Block podcast. Day before Halloween. Fitting that you have the mask for the GOAT of the current league. But let's talk Toronto Raptors. So the Toronto Raptors have some free agents. Fred VanVleet, Serge Ibaka, Marc Gasol, the notable ones. Out of those three, I guess we know that Marc's the most unrealistic of coming back. Probably wants to go back home to Spain. And we've talked about, but whatever. We wouldn't have won a championship. Toronto wouldn't have won a championship without him here. So kudos to Marc, probably a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
Between Serge now, if you lose Serge, I feel like you really have some depth issues in the front court because we don't have too much there. Fred as well.
No faith in Slim Duck.
Are you going to start him? Are you going to start?
No, I wouldn't.
Shout out to our guy.
I wouldn't start him, but at the end of the day, he might have earned some. In limited situation, if he can put on
he's a rotation guy.
Yeah, if he can put on some bulk and like with his athleticism, he might be a player.
He's going to be a rotation guy. Yeah. Just if you're going to start him, if the Toronto Raptors are going to start him, your team has to be incredible. I don't know if that's going to be the case, right? But let's get back to Fred.
Shout out to Montreal.
Shout out to Montreal and Haiti. But so Fred's a free agent, and obviously the Knicks chatter's been out there. You don't think that he's going to take that additional money to go to because the Knicks are a train wreck.
The Knicks have been a train wreck, and a lot of guys take the money, and with the whole pandemic thing, I understand guys wanting to get paid. It all really depends on what Fred's priorities are, and that's a simple scenario. If his priorities are to win, he likely re-signs on a friendly-esque deal with the Raptors. If he's chasing money, he might probably ends up going to a team that's been struggling for ages, like the Knicks, where he gets paid and is secure for his family, but whatever, 20, 30 million. I mean, you can live decently off of that money either way. I personally, again, I've never met Fred, never talked to Fred, but he seems like the type of guy that is a reasonably loyal individual, and he has to take into effect that the Raptors gave him an opportunity to get paid. He was an undrafted free agent. Raptors gave him a shot. They cultivated him, allowed him to play, and now
learned a lot from Kyle.
Learned a lot from Kyle, and he knows what his role on the team is going to be and what the team is going to be. Now, obviously, the Raptors are in a transition phase. It was put off for a couple of years because of the whole Kawhi thing. Then last year, they ran the majority of it back because they were the defending champions, and they were hoping for some, and they played better than most people. A lot of people thought they would, based on the fact that I think that the whole championship run helped a lot of guys. You saw some elevation from Pascal Siakam, not so much in the playoffs. And guys played at different levels. Fred got higher up. OG played. They're still talking of OG becoming even a bigger. I don't call OG a star, but his defensive roles are solid. His offensive game is getting there. Some people predict that he's going to be an all-star. We'll see how that goes with his offensive game. They have the pieces there, and I mean, if Fred wants to actually win or compete, he likely stays with the Raptors. There's not a lot of teams that. I think a lot of teams are waiting to spend their money next year with a great crop coming up. So then the teams that are really going to be in there are teams that are probably thinking that they're not going to get any of those guys, so they're going to splurge, like the Knicks.
Sacramento teams like that.
Yeah, and where are those teams going to be? The Knicks. I mean, we were just discussing it off camera. Barrett wasn't great last year.
You don't really see any. I mean, I do like Mitchell Robinson at center. I think he's got some
Foul
capabilities.
problems, but some
Yeah,
promise.
some capabilities as a solid defender.
Knox, we're not sure. What he
There,
is
you know,
either.
Knox. You know,
Nilpino.
there's talk for like Dennis Smith Jr. Is he gonna recover from what's been going on with him? There's a whole lot of holes. It seems to be a rotational coach every year.
They have the Clippers first round pick for whatever that's worth for Marcus Morris. I don't know how that deal. We looked at it at the time. We're like, oh, the Clippers were trying to get Morris from the Lakers. They gave up another first round pick to get him. I just remember, like, that's crazy.
I mean, like, that's the thing. And we were talking about the Clippers. Like, their lack of draft capital will end up hurting them significantly.
Yeah.
But again, the Clippers.
Back to the Raptors.
The Clippers, this year's draft to me, like another thing that we were discussing off air. I don't know who, like the high end talent. We know about Ball. We know about Wiseman and Edwards. I don't know what those capabilities will be. I've seen enough of Ball. I don't like it. I don't like the family. I've been very adamant that I don't like the family. I think the dad's a loudmouth and he should really keep his mouth shut because his predictions have been atrocious. And all he's done with his other son is basically destroy him because he's comparing him to Stephen, to Curry. And here's the thing. Ball had a pretty good year last year comparably to what he was in the Lakers. Mm-hmm. So he might be he's still going to be a serviceable piece, mm-hmm. but he's not going to be He's not going to be Steph Curry. He's not going to be anything of the sort. And what now we have the young kid who's supposedly better than even than his brother, yeah. And we're already hearing that he's doing terrible during interviews. And he's supposed to be one of the top 2 picks. So I don't know how good this draft class is going to be. We didn't see them much during March, and we've got limited exposure. So I mean, a pick in the late 20s, who the heck knows? Yeah. You never know because
it's a deep draft, and there's no stars. There's not very many stars. Maybe a few guys at the beginning.
And truthfully, you just never know. I mean, I actually one of my buddies was tweeted about the 1999 draft when the Raptors took Alexander Radojevic, who at 12th overall played like 15 games. It was awful. Now there was a guy in the second round, you probably know him, a guy named Manu Ginobili who ended up being pretty good. So you just never know, and I think it's one of those type of drafts where like you might be able to snag a guy that ends up being solid and that is really under the radar in the 20s. And for example, the Raptors drafting usually has been pretty good in the 20s,
exactly.
Pascal and so forth. So they might find like a diamond in the rough, but I don't know in terms of that kind of stuff. That pick that late for the Knicks, and considering the fact that they've been terrible drafting,
that might be better for them because there's no pressure. Oh, we need to take this guy. Maybe take the best available guy at 25, whatever. Can't be worse than what they've done so far.
That's for sure.
I want to finish up though with Fred. So, do you think that Fred ends up staying, or do you think that he chases money? Because we know the Raptors are going to have a competitive offer. It might be $2 or $3 million lower than the average.
I think Fred will stay because he's built the base. Just like I stated, they gave him an opportunity. If he decides to leave, I'll be slightly surprised. If he chases the money, it is what it is. It's business. But like I think he knows that he might not have gotten these opportunities in other situations and opportunities to grow. And there's a winning mentality here. So if he chased money over that, then all the best to him. And if he comes back, I'm at the game, I'll give him a little clap, and then I'll probably boo him the rest of the game. And it is what it is. That's business.
But the thing too is point guard is probably the deepest position in the NBA. So I don't think there's as many suitors as there would be for another position.
And as you mentioned, like Fred got a little found out in the playoffs. What is Fred? Is Fred a starting caliber point guard that can lead you to something? I personally don't know because he does become very hot and cold. And it's, again, just like we mentioned with Pascal, it was the Raptors' pecking order last year when they won the championship was great.
Perfect.
You had the big dog in Kawhi, and then you had these other 2 or 3, 4 guys that are basically able to be supporting cast. When Kawhi left, a lot more defensive pressure came on Pascal in the playoffs, on Fred, on Kyle. And, I'll give Kyle credit. Like I said, I'll never be the number 1 Kyle Lowry supporter.
He had a better playoff than he did.
He had a better playoffs. Kyle it was one of those things with consistency. One game he goes off for 30, the next game he goes off for 12. It was one of those situations. But I mean, Kyle, I think stepped up. There were times that I thought for and a little bit was on Nick Nurse. I'll be honest. There was some plays not calling timeout, and then Freddie's throwing up 60-foot shots.
Yeah, half-court shot.
Half-court shot, and then at the end of the last game where should have called timeout, and then Fred ended up airballing the shot. There was issues. There was some questionable stuff from Fred there. So he's a streaky player too. So I mean, I give him the 4 years, $20 million. I give him that. If he starts getting into the 25 million a year, I'd be a little bit. I'm not going to give him 100 mil. I definitely won't give him 100 million because again, you want to be competitive, but you also got to be smart with your money. You also want to be ready for next year where the Raptors. Kyle's going to be gone. Serge might take a 1-year deal. Who knows? They'll have money available to chase some pretty significant free agents. And there's been talk. Giannis likes Golden State, likes Miami, likes the Raptors. It all depends on the situation. Would I rather wait and throw that money at Giannis potentially? Yeah, because it'll make us competitive. Is Giannis the missing piece for another Raptors championship?
Possibly.
Possibly. But he's gonna have to keep improving with his shooting.
We have shooting here. That's the thing.
And again, like what's gonna happen with Kyle? You're not gonna. To me, you can't pay Kyle top dollar when man's 35 years old.
No, I don't think Kyle's next contract is gonna be, like I said, in terms of the overload of point guards in the league. Kyle's probably not gonna start for very many teams in 2 years from now. Right? Like when he's 36, probably at that point, I assume he's about 34 now.
Yeah.
As a 36-year-old point guard, you're probably going to be a backup, have 1 or 2 seasons. Like that's a position you need to be.
Yeah.
It's not like a big man.
And the situation is there, like the Raptors set themselves up nicely with that next year where, depending on how the team's going, he could be a legitimate trade piece that you can grab assets for if you believe that you're not going to be competing for a championship. Because again, I think based on the fact that they'll still have a majority of the core back, depending on the situation. If by some odd reason you do lose Fred, you do lose Serge, you're probably not in the championship conversation. Let's be honest. So Kyle will then be next year used as draft capital, where you can trade Kyle to a contender for some draft picks and start rebuilding the team. Because at the end of the day, if you lose Fred, you lose Serge, and we haven't talked about Mr. Davis, Lord. I don't know what the hell he was thinking. That's another problem.
We might all of a sudden. Not this season, but the year after for sure have a point guard issue, right?
Yeah. And again, there's no center depth with Mark gone and then Serge is gone. And then you're starting, Slim Duck at center at this point. And you're might lose Rondé. Rondé didn't get much playing time in that Boston series. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But the Raptors are going to have a lot of questions going forward.
Yeah. Between Serge and Fred, who do you think is more likely to come back?
Probably Serge.
Really?
Because I think Serge has been a little bit more vocal about enjoying what he's been here, and he knows that because he won a chip here. He's comfortable, like he enjoys being in Toronto. Yeah. I think Serge is probably because he's more of a veteran. He's already won the ring. He's been around a little bit. He's gotten his paydays, and I think him and Toronto with the Homofuzi chef thing. He just seems like he's more built more at home and more built in that he probably they were talking about the Rockets and this and that.
Yeah, so the Rockets 2 or 3 year deal.
But like let's be honest, the Rockets window probably to win a championship is lowering as again the Warriors are going to be much better next year. I don't even see the Rockets being top 4 or top 5 and even in the West, more or less the championship conversation. So when you got the Lakers, you got the Clippers. You got the Warriors. The Nuggets are going to be much better. Like maybe they're at 5.
Yeah, it would be one of Dallas.
Again, Dallas. More and more he's gone. The whole they get the new style of coaching. Now are you going to go back to playing with bigs? Center. You got no centers right now. They're in too much flux to really be there. So I don't know. It'll really be depending on the situation. But yeah, I think Serge. It looks like he's more ingrained, and he's been more vocal about wanting to stay. Fred's been a little bit standoffish.
Fred doesn't say much anyways. That's the thing, right? So the Raptors have, let's say it's like the 26th pick in the draft this year. I don't know. I guess I'll say my thing first, then you can go. But you got to see, I guess, what's available at that point. We said that the Raptors have drafted very well, especially towards the end of the draft. But I think if Serge or Fred leaves, you address that position instantly. If both come back or both leave, then you kind of have to decide, do I need to get a point guard, do I need to get a center? I would lean more towards center only because I feel like I said earlier, there's so many point guards in the league, you can fill that, maybe not with a star, but for a 1-year gap or something until you get a higher pick, I think you're better off going for a center or like a stretch 4 that you can fill into that position as opposed to drafting a point guard at like 25th overall. What do you think?
I mean, I think the Raptors, and they're just going by their history, when they draft based off of need, it never goes well. I think the last time the Raptors really drafted on need was when they drafted
Caruso?
Hoffa, and that ended up really, really badly for the Raptors.
Yeah.
When they passed on Iguodala and they went for like the best center that was in the thing because they needed
The
a
only
center.
center, yeah.
Yeah, and that ended up real bad for them. So I think that the Raptors, you go with best player available. Whether it ends up being whether it's
Whatever
power
position,
forward. Like,
small.
I'm sure that again they're they have certain things where that Pascal and OG are probably going to be the core of the team, and then you got to go see what the situation is. But I got faith that the Raptors can pick up a decent guy that'll be a rotational type of player. I mean, last year they only had a second rounder, and Hernandez barely played because it was a deep team. Yeah, it was a deep play
for most of it.
But you know what? Like, give them credit. Some of those guys that played in the bubble that got heavy minutes when the Raptors had already clinched, they're pretty goddamn
Thomas
good.
also, right?
Yeah.
Matt Thomas had obviously had a really
They
good, a lot better
started.
than most people thought.
Watson was pretty good.
Yeah, the
Watson.
point guard, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, as much as he was a bit of a bust for the majority, Stanley Johnson, when he actually got some minutes, wasn't half bad.
Yeah.
But again, he got himself out of the rotation early. Yeah.
Third stringers.
Well, I mean, I think it was a couple of games where they started. The majority got hardcore minutes, and they won a majority of those games. So
yeah.
And again, it's garbage time minutes for sure, but still reasonable, like pretty good for depth situations. Again, going back to that whole series, no idea why Matt Thomas should probably have gotten more minutes because they needed some shooting.
Yeah, exactly.
And I have no idea when they were having so much trouble with Tatum why they didn't use. I don't know if Rondae was hurt. I thought he's terrible offensive because he can't really save his life.
That's why, yeah. They're
But
just like,
they would have needed him
throw a body at him, right?
defensively.
Yeah.
I had no idea what Nurse was doing there. And then our resident news getter these days, Mr. Terrence Davis, didn't really play in that Boston series either. And that might have been his. Well,
so what do we do with what do the
here's the
Raptors
thing.
do with Terrence Davis?
I am 100% against any sort of woman beating, wife beating, or whatever it was.
Child,
anything
any kind of
anything of that. I'm against all that. Whether it's a situation where maybe she was the aggressor or whatever, I don't know the details of it. I've heard that it was actually an ex-girlfriend. It wasn't even his current girlfriend, and he's got about 7 charges. You got to cut the man. It's simple as that. I saw people on social media calling him a star and like. He was all right. He had moments of real potential, which made him an all rookie second team. But he's not. But let's get it straight. Like he's not going to be an all-star level player. Yeah. And here's the thing: you as a Raptors as an organization, you do your due diligence, but it looks really bad.
I don't like, and I thought about it right away. I was like, let's find out some facts, whatever. I don't like unless
you got a lot of charges.
You got a lot of charges. I don't know really how you get away. It's not like it's something where.
I mean, and his decision making, like we saw it in the bubble with the mask and cutting the thing.
Yeah, I didn't see that, but you saw.
He might have a little bit of a couple of screws loose with that. And we don't want to get into this mask versus anti-mask.
We're not going to do that here.
But the reality is that like purposely doing that is right. I don't know what he was trying to send a message to. Like even if you're against it, you can. And here's the situation I tell everybody: even if you're against it, and this whole thing's been corrupting our lives and whatever, this whole COVID thing. If it's there to protect other people, even if it makes you a little uncomfortable, just freaking do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not. I get it. It's not the most comfortable thing, but you knew what the NBA policy was, and it affects. Like we gotta look back at that Daniel House thing was another example. Like would the Rockets have been a better matchup for the Lakers? Absolutely. Had Daniel actually like use his common sense and actually follow protocols. He did it, and look what happened. And the same thing with Terrence. I have no idea about his personal life, but you just can't be doing. The Raptors are an organization that always goes on social matters like that. You can't keep That's
the thing, and they've built such a reputation for being, a class act organization.
You saw it with Osuna. Like Osuna was with the Blue Jays.
Yeah.
You saw Osuna catch that case, and they traded him almost right up. He was like a potentially top 5 closer in the league. We don't deal with that stuff here very well, and he's got to be smarter. He was literally on the cusp of getting paid, of becoming something that, again, another guy that was undrafted that was taken down. And when you do stuff like that, I don't know what goes through people's heads. I really don't.
I don't think it just goes through your head. It seems like it's probably who you are as a person. Like anything just kind of happens. And it's unfortunate because anybody that knows the show or knows us, I've been bigging him up all year, right? Like I loved his game. I thought he was, I don't want to say the next Fred, but like you said, another guy that came in undrafted, showed a lot of promise, and worst case, a backup point guard for this team.
Here's the thing, and the reality is that sometimes you just never know people. how they really are. But who would have figured like 15, 20 years ago, like what's going on with like Bill Cosby and stuff? Who would have figured Bill Cosby would have done what he did? Like nobody.
You never know.
Nobody. You just never know how their public personas are and how their personal lives are. And like I said, things happen. You snap and so forth. But you got to be smart with your decision making, especially in these circumstances where you're trying to become something, because that'll follow him the rest of
his career, for the rest of his life.
And I think the NBA is a little bit like they don't take it as
it's a liberal league.
It's more of a liberal league, and they don't take it. I want to say that the NFL punishes guys a little harsher for those things, while the NBA
is
more
common in the NFL.
Yeah, it's more common in the NFL. And the NBA doesn't take it; takes more of a hands-off approach to it, which isn't right, in my opinion. Again, at the end of the day, I don't know what the situation was. I don't know what caused it, but I think the Raptors have very little. Like if they do their due diligence, and I personally think I'm not the biggest fan of the police either, but considering they laid 7 charges on him, that's pretty damning.
And the woman ended up in the hospital.
Yeah,
that's
with a busted situation. So again, like innocent until proven guilty. But it looks real rough.
That's the thing. If there wasn't some kind of battery in it, it would be a different story. Maybe it's a verbal thing, but it seems to be like there was hands laid on a woman, right?
Yeah.
Let's move on from that. So you think that he gets cut, right? Is it a foregone?
I would say that's about a 95% chance he gets cut, unless something comes out where the story was fabricated or something to do like that. That happens sometimes, but I would say 95% he gets cut.
So we'll finish off with the Raptors then. Last thing we're going to leave with in terms of basketball, a trade that might change the landscape of the league a little bit. We kind of talked about this. Bradley Beal seems to be on his way out of Washington, has been in trade rumors for years. Golden State owns a 2nd pick in the draft. They have Andrew Wiggins, former number 1 pick in the draft. Not a bust, a guy that can get you 20 points a game. Now there's talk that Golden State sends the 2nd pick, Wiggins, and Minnesota's first-round pick that they owed from the Russell trade from last year there for Beal and maybe some throw-ins. Now, if you have a starting lineup with Steph Curry, Beal, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and you as center, right? Like,
oh man, well, that's
like, is that team not a lock to at least get to the West Final if healthy? You have to think so, right?
I mean, again, we always it's one of those fantasy type scenarios.
It's not fantasy though, I don't think.
Well,
this is a realistic trade that's
well, it is. But what I mean is you just don't know how things will gel, how things will go, right? I think we've kind of gone to that point where we got for example, we got the first year of the Heat where everyone thought they dominated, and they ended up choking as the special correspondent.
But they still made it to the finals.
They still made it to the finals. But what was that? What they thought, they just roll through everybody, which didn't happen. The Warriors in that type of situation would definitely be a heavy contender. Now, Washington is at one of those things where they just don't know what the situation is. They got heavy money invested in Wall.
Or maybe 2 more years.
It's
next year's a write-off for everybody anyway.
Yeah. So I mean, is it a smart trade for them to do, depending if they want to rebuild the team? Absolutely. I don't know if I take that Wiggins contract, but I guess Warriors would have to based on the fact that
Beal's getting similar money.
Yeah. So I mean, you take the Wiggins money back, you get the draft capital. Yeah. So I mean, it makes sense for the Wizards to do it. Absolutely. If you believe that whether you're getting with that 2nd overall pick is going to be whatever, if you're going to put in, if it's going to be Ball, if it's going to be, Wiseman or whoever ends up being, it all really depends on how you look at the draft. Now, could you hold on to Beal for, maybe next year's situation where there might be a better pick available? Yeah, but you might, well, I won't say better pick, but maybe a higher end asset.
Your own pick next year as well and be a terrible team, right?
Yeah, and then you have to think out the Warriors are in one of those weird places where they were a championship level team. The bottom fell out last year because of injuries, and then now they're in a position where they had just come from championship level team to a 2nd overall pick, which is unheard of usually.
Only the Pistons did that, right? And the Pistons messed that up.
And
it was the 2nd overall pick.
And the Cavaliers with when it comes to LeBron leaving and so forth, because they always bought him out like crazy. So it's not as when people leave and so forth. The Warriors didn't have really people leave; they had more injuries, and then Durant left. But had Klay and Steph been absolutely healthy, they obviously would not have been as bad as they were.
That's what I'm saying. Steph, dislocates a finger or some kind of finger injury, right? He's going to come back. He's going to be Steph Curry. Klay Thompson tears his ACL, which of course he's not the most athletic guy to begin with. And in 2020, we know just in terms of medicine these days.
Yeah.
He's going to come back and be fine. He's going to shoot the lights out.
With the situation as well, like what Draymond's going to be going forward and so forth.
He's going to play defense.
Yeah, if that happens, they'll definitely be a contender. But like I said, depending on the gel, like the ball movement, you just never know, right? Because we all thought, the Clippers are going to be no problem, and then then all that stuff happens with.
But the thing about the Clippers is that was different. This is a whole bunch of guys coming in, two superstars coming in. The Warriors have their core already. They have their 3 core players, and you're adding in
another core player.
I don't want to say perennial all-star.
I would say so.
No, Beal, I'm saying. I don't know if he's made it every year, but he's been an all-star.
He should. Right? I think Beal's been because of the situation in Washington,
and
he's definitely been looked over.
No,
I think he definitely should have
one of the best shooters in the
all-star
league.
game, 100%.
Like they have arguably 3 of the top 10 shooters in the league if you get them.
And then there's another thing. What's Beal's mindset? Is Beal going to be good being a third wheel? Is he gonna enjoy that? I don't know. I don't know the guy. I don't know the guy.
That many years.
Does he want to be the lead dog? A lot of these guys have that ego. I mean, that we don't take that into effect. Like would he probably take the trade? Absolutely. Like you'd be dumb not to.
Yeah.
But is he going to be okay with it? Then the only guy that's going to be, because again, we talk about all the time. One of the reasons that Durant got in the situation that he is now is he knows that he could do whatever the heck he could do in Golden State. That wasn't his team. Like they might have given him whatever. But that was Steph's team. That Durant was more of seen as a passenger, a very good passenger.
100%. But you can't compare Durant. Durant is going to be the best team, the best player on whatever team he goes to, pretty much, except unless he's on LeBron's team. But even then.
But he didn't get the credit that he wanted, and you can tell that made him spiteful, in my opinion.
Yes, but that's like if LeBron, not LeBron, but I just think that when you're in that echelon, it's a different category. I think that Beal is not in that same echelon.
I would agree, but again, I don't know what Beal believes he is in his mind.
I think he's seen what he is on a bad team or on a team
Does
as well.
Beal want to be the star, or does Beal want to be a complimentary piece?
Do you think after all those years, it's probably been 7 years in Washington, and going to the playoffs against the Raptors and being whatever, do you think that he's still going to be like, I need to be the guy that's the best player on the team?
Again, I think Beal's mentality has been he wants to win, but he also wants to get his. So that'll be interesting. Is he going to be okay to go from like a 25 point guy to maybe down into the 18s? I don't know. Is that gonna take a dig at his ego? It all depends on what we only know when they get in the situation, right? So if that trade happens, it would be a remarkable trade. Yeah. I think Golden State should probably do it because they're going to win down because Steph and Clay aren't getting any younger. I mean,
but still, let's say
what Steph at
32, 31, 32 kind of thing.
And then again, they're in those situations where they're and the West is getting better. Their window is starting to diminish at least a little bit because they're shooters. But again, they also have some holes in that roster that they need to fill. But they know the window is now, so they probably will. They probably will trade that draft capital to get some help now because that would be the smart thing to take advantage of the best years left of Clay and Steph's career. So would they be smart to do that? Absolutely.
Okay, so if Golden State gets Beal, where do you have them finishing the season next year? Losing in the East
in the
West Final
in the playoffs.
How do you think?
As constructed,
as the league is right now,
I think they would probably. I would agree with you that they probably would make the Western Conference Finals. I mean, it's tough to say. Well, it's tough to say because we don't know what the other teams are going to do, right? Who knows?
They're better than Denver. I think I like Denver.
Will the Lakers go grab somebody? Will the Clippers change their team? I mean, Denver is what it is. I think they'd be better than Denver based on the fact
they'd be better than Denver. They'd be better than Dallas. I think is a wild card, but I still think they're better than Dallas.
Yeah, I would say that they'd be top 3 with the Lakers and the Clippers. And then it all depends on what the
those guys shine in the playoffs. It's not like we have to worry about are they going to play. Steph's going to hit his shots, Clay's going to hit his shots. You're going to play defense.
And then Beal's the wild card. So again, I think it would be a heck of a team. I mean, I think it would be you pay to watch the guys play because again,
we won't be able to pay because we won't be able to see anything next year.
But at the end of the day, it all depends on how the chemistry goes, right? And I agree with you that it's different than the Clippers because there's 2 stars there.
You're plugging a guy in as opposed to
depends on what Beal's mentality is going in because. I mean, if you're good being more of that kind of situation, remember, he's never been a third wheel.
But how many guys have gone being, from this, because he's probably still the second guy when Wall was there. Now he's taking it up a notch. But as a second or one guy to be the third guy to win a title, who has not done well in that role? Or who's saying no?
So for example, I'll give you a perfect, because me, you, and the special correspondents have argued about this. Kevin Love has never recovered from that transition to Cleveland. He was a guy that was in Minnesota was the top dog, crazy rebounds, crazy points at times. He was going 30 for 30.
But they still won a championship. He was still an all-star that year.
But his level has never recovered, even since LeBron's been gone. And again, he's been nowhere near the player that he was in Minnesota. Even when he got the lead dog stuff, the injuries, and we can talk about that.
He's older, and he's a power forward.
But he doesn't have the influence on the game that he used to have, not by a long shot.
No, but I'm not talking about after that. I'm talking about when you're with that team.
Yeah, but again,
was the level less, like, it took him a bit to adjust for sure. But did he hinder them into winning a championship or losing a championship?
I mean, at times he looked like he was the guy that was like, well, like LeBron's got Kevin Love, and everyone would be like scoffing, like, oh, Love isn't that great. And at times he had some really bad performances because maybe he wasn't used to like playing in that kind of complimentary role. Because at times Love made some all-star teams, but he never looked like the player that he was in Minnesota. And blame LeBron and all this other stuff. But it's also mentality based where if you know that you're playing second fiddle or third fiddle like Bill would be playing, he might plug off a little bit. It would be great to see. And I think that they would do well because I think they have the capabilities, depending on who the other role players are. It would be again sharing the basketball. Again,
he's not a ball dominant.
Would you consider him a ball dominant?
I feel like he's had to be since Wall's been out. That's the thing. But when Wall was there, he was not. And I think that the difference between Love became a much better shooter when he got to the Cavs as well. I think that if you're a shooter, the transition to be lower in the pecking order is a much easier transition because you're going from being double teamed like he is now in Washington, the guy, one of the leading scorers in the league last year, to getting wide open threes because you'd rather cover Steph and Clay. And I think that's an easy transition for him.
Now, again, while that trade rumor's really been in there, there has been rumors that Beal wouldn't mind going to the Lakers. And if that were to happen...
But we need assets. You can't just sign free agents. Yeah. They don't have assets, so we need to kill that right there.
Because it isn't realistic. I mean, considering the fact that
all they have is Davis, who's not being traded. And you need trade.
Well, I mean, they
don't have draft picks either.
Well, I mean, I personally think that this is probably the playoffs was probably Kuzma's last year, and Kuzma's nowhere near the talent level of some of these other picks that they're getting, or even Wiggins.
That's what I'm saying. So if you're Washington GM, who are you asking for?
I don't know. I guess it really depends on how they see some of those guys. But I mean, even Chris Paul has been talking about. I wouldn't put Chris Paul in there because Chris Paul's making too much money. And I still don't see the fit right now in terms of how that would all work for the Lakers.
If the Lakers get Chris Paul, if the Lakers were to get Chris Paul, like I'd probably bet money that they win the championship.
Really?
Yeah.
Even at an advanced stage and so.
And we saw last year
his money, they would have to fill the whole roster with just mid-league.
And that's fine. The Golden State did that.
That's fair.
Right, like you said earlier in the show, you get a bunch of guys that want to come in on minimums.
So you have Paul. LeBron tends to dominate the ball. Paul would be the starter at point guard. I mean,
would
he
it be there? Huh? You say wouldn't be the starter?
No, he would be the starter.
Yeah, but we saw.
And LeBron likes to be ball dominant. At least
but James Harden's ball dominant. Chris Paul played with him and was still an all-star.
That'd be interesting. But again, I think too much money. We'll see. But again,
getting back to Beal, we'll wrap up.
Getting back to Beal, if that trade were to go down, I think the Warriors again will probably make the Western Conference Finals, and depending on who they face in the matchups, it would be an interesting situation.
Them and the Lakers for sure.
Yeah. Or even again, who knows what the Clippers will do, and I don't know.
Unless Paul George
you kind of soured on that on how.
Not really. Like I didn't, as a partial Clippers fan growing up, I didn't feel the same connection. Like when I was growing up, obviously it was like Darius Miles, Lamar Odom, all those kind of guys. They were trash, but they were fun to watch. Then we had like Elton Brand, and then there was the Blake era with Chris Paul and all those guys. That was really fun to watch. I just didn't feel the same connection to this new team.
Was it because they went from underdogs to the favorites?
Yeah, like they bring in Kawhi, Paul George. They start demanding Paul George at the deadline, and we're there waiting on our phones like is Kawhi coming?
Poor Clipper Darryl. He finally thought he had gotten somewhere, and then he just got taken right out.
Clippers Darryl and Mr. Grant share some of the similar hatred towards
the brother. Oh yeah,
right?
Yeah, 100%.
Any last closing thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I mean, like I said, I think the offseason is going to be interesting. I think
the start date also, we're not sure.
Start date, there's been guys that think that they won't come back that early. That'll be.
They won't have a choice.
True, again, the deal and so forth. But like for example, I don't know. As like for example, the Heat and the Lakers players that were there the whole time, and then I don't know. To me, like I saw Danny Green's comments, and you do come off as a little bit spoiled.
But he did say in the comments right after, said, take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I completely understand that you were like, locked in a bubble for 3 months and you need time to be with your family, and I completely get that. But you're also paid a whole heck of a lot of money to play a sport. And if you're gonna complain that you only had 2 months off while people are dealing with this pandemic and some people can't even eat, I really got no pity for you. Because at the end of the day, a lot of people are going through some really hard times.
There's going to be a lot. If the season...
And come on, Danny. Come on.
They said that the league...
That's why they robbed you in Vancouver, Danny.
Oh,
Don't be doing stuff. Don't be saying stuff like that.
But Silver, and there's been reports that the league does wait that extra 3 weeks between Christmas and shout out to Boston. Sorry, shout out to BC and Vancouver, my boy Joey B. But if they don't start on Christmas and they start Martin Luther King Day, they're going to lose about $500 million in generated TV money, and that's not something after the money they lost that they can do. When the phone rings and says be a training camp this time, they're going to be there, and we're going to see a lot of load management next year, and that's fine.
You think?
Oh, for sure. Especially you talk about guys like the Lakers and stuff, not just from star players, but
See,
minutes are going to go down.
I've been hearing different that a lot of guys that, like, for example, like Ty Lue, who's taking over the Clippers, that he's not gonna be in favor of any of that because it showed in the playoffs.
I'm not talking about really guys.
I remember they had 5 months off, so we can't. And a lot of those teams haven't, like, not everyone was in the bubble, right? All those teams haven't played ball for like almost gonna be on 9-10 months. Like, all those guys should be fresh as a daisy.
Yeah, those guys aren't saying much. But even like Butler, Butler's fishing right now, and
but yeah, I'm talking about how can you say you get 5 months off between the situation and then the bubble, and then you had the bubble for a couple months, then you have another month and a half or whatever. You literally had 7 months off, and then we're 3. Like, you can't really do much.
Even the teams that went to the finals were off for about 3 months, right?
Yeah, you were off. You were
pretty
like,
much March to April, May, June. They started when?
You were off for 5 months. Like, you had a 5 month rest. Like, I'm not gonna cry for you that you only had a month and a half of summer vacation or whatever it might be. Like, grab me a river on that, man. You just had 6 months off. And you were I think you were getting paid on them. Can't remember if they were giving them checks.
Prorated or whatever.
Prorated checks. You're getting paid, man. You get your butt in the gym.
Yeah, and getting back to the load management, I don't necessarily mean taking games off. I just mean instead of playing 35 minutes a game, you'll play 30. You know what I mean? Like, you're winning a game. It's not do or die every game. You're going to get into the playoffs. As the season goes on, your legs come back. You'll play.
Let's be real. If they were to offer us like $2-3 million each, man, I'm playing 46 minutes. I don't give a damn. Like, for $2 million, I'm going in there. Like, you can tire me out for 40 games or whatever, 60, 70 games. Man, I'll play the whole damn game. It's like a game every, whatever. You're playing basketball, for God's sakes.
Yeah. And you have the best recovery guys in the league. You're taking care of your body.
You're chilling out.
Okay, so we're going to wrap it up there for the basketball part. We're going to come back probably whenever they announce the season's going to come back, do some previews and that kind of stuff.
Happy Halloween from the GOAT.
Yeah, guys. Have a happy, safe Halloween. And we'll talk some NFL also as well. Take care. Until next time, for Igor Joe, we'll see you next time on the block.